So as we stated, obesity, similar to mental health, is existing in women different than it is in men. Okay, so let's take a look at what is the point of the presentation today. And as I stated earlier, this is really a call to action, a call for increased funding from the National Institutes of Health around examining the effectiveness of treating depression through the treatment of obesity for women. So that's really where we're headed. We want to look at those two factors together and see if addressing one is going to help the other automatically. Now, we've looked at data around mental health in isolation, and then we briefly looked at a little bit around obesity. It's time for us now to look at sources that brought those two factors together. Okay, and the data points that we have from these sources is that people who have depression are more likely to be obese than those who don't have depression. Okay, and for women, women with depression were more likely to be obese than women without it, and that is not always the case for men. So again, that's singling women out. That's an important detail to understand. And finally, when examining data from women with depression, obesity worsens as the severity of their depression, regardless of age. So, women who are obese, they would only likely see a dip in their weight later on in life, as we saw earlier. After a certain age, your obesity drops a little bit. After around the age of 65, on average, we see a little dip, but that would really be dependent on the severity of your depression if you have depression. Okay, so that's an important fact to also accept. Here we have an image that further illustrates that point. It's helpful to see these data points in different ways. And this is looking at younger age group, but you can see from the light gray, the girls with the higher BMIs have the highest numbers of percent of major depression. So our y-axis is calling out that percent of depression, and you can see that it's most representative in the highest BMI group, the highest female BMI group, significantly higher than the boys group. Okay, so again, just more data that supports the difference of these factors existing in a female versus a male. And that should help illustrate why we are asking the National Institutes of Health to fund more studies examining the effectiveness of treating depression through the treatment of obesity for women. Okay, so before we go deeper, we want to look at some of the challenges. So, one of the key treatments for depression is counseling paired with antidepressants. Well, unfortunately, antidepressants leads to weight gain. So that's going to create a complication for someone who's struggling with obesity and depression. Okay, so that's important to keep in mind. Are there naysayers to looking at this approach of addressing addressing depression through obesity? Absolutely. So let's take a look at their perspectives so we can address them. They believe that it's an attempt to simplify a complex issue and that the strategy is unsupported by evidence. Okay, so let's take a look at some data that addresses their concerns. So first of all, we have in 2011, University of Texas found that patients' depressive symptoms were reduced when doctors assigned them weekly exercise sessions. So what we have here is a study that shows decrease in depressive symptoms. That's a huge deal, right? And how did that happen? Part of what they did was assign them weekly exercise sessions. So that's an important detail that addresses the naysayers. How did they get these people exercise? They offered them a facility, public facility, but they also offered them visits to home, which made sure that they made their target exercise prescription from that doctor.